Let's fire off with this. How would you describe your tenure as the Chief Justice?
I would say that it was a tenure during which I ensured that the judiciary remained stable. There was stability in the judiciary, and there was huge increase in the representation of women in the leadership of the judiciary. And that during that period, we ensured that we defended the independence of the judiciary, maintained the rule of law, and wanted to make sure that we upheld the Constitution and the rule of law.
What are some of your career highlights, CJ?
I would say they include the following. One, merely being appointed as a judge in 1997 when I was 37 years old, which is, I think, quite young. I think that was quite an achievement. And then being appointed as judge president when I had been a judge for only about 3 years, was quite a highlight. And not just being judge president, but being judge president of an appeal court, that is the Labour Appeal Court, and the Labour Court, which were new courts, and then the opportunity that afforded me to influence the direction of labour law jurisprudence in this country for the next 10 years and beyond. And of course, chairing the State Capture Commission, being Deputy Chief Justice and Chief Justice. And if you talk about during the time of being Chief Justice, then really it's the advancement of the wish of the judiciary to have institutional independence in this country. I appointed the WEPE committee. It was a committee chaired by retired Judge President WEPE, with some academic involved and some senior legal practitioners. And their mandate, that is the committee chaired by retired Judge President WEPE, was to look at what still needed to be done, what were the loose ends that needed to be tied from the previous report, look at the report from the executive, and make recommendations in terms of our response to that. And we have shared that with the executive, and we wanted to have more meetings to try and finalize, but unfortunately we didn't receive cooperation from the executive as far as meetings are concerned. So, of course, I've mentioned already the issue of women in the leadership of the judiciary increasing. When I became Chief Justice, we had only 2 heads of court who were women, Justice Maya as Supreme Court of Appeal President, and Judge President Monica Liu, who was Judge President of the Northwest Division of the High Court. But since then, during my term, we had 5 being appointed, including Justice Maya being appointed Chief Justice.
Now, Chief Justice, do you think that you're leaving the judiciary in a better way than what you'd found it?
Yes, I think I do, but I'm not happy that the progress we made is progress that I would have liked to have made, because in the sense that I would have liked to have had more time, in which case we would have made more progress. But I think that within the time that I had, we have made reasonable progress. There's still a lot to be done. I mean, I'm living at a time when, in terms of the annual judiciary report that I delivered publicly on the 26th of July, I'm living at a time when, in terms of the previous financial year, the judiciary, the courts, have performed very well, namely 85% of the targets that they had fixed for themselves. So the performance of the court is very good. Of course, the courts have got other challenges which depend on the executive. There are many courts where we should have more courtrooms so that more cases could be heard, but we don't have, because the executive, the government has not allocated money. We have many courts where we need more judges, but we have asked the executive to create posts for judges so that those posts can be filled and therefore the courts can serve the public better. But that has not been done. So there are lots of challenges. And of course, we still have an unacceptable level of backlog of cases in the courts. We had fixed a target for ourselves as the judiciary, namely that every court should ensure that the backlog was at 30%. But that is one of the targets that we failed to achieve. It's one of two targets that we failed to achieve. All other targets we achieved. But part of the reason goes back to what resources do the courts have? What resources do the judiciary have? If we have institutional independence, we would be able to be the ones who make decisions about whether more courtrooms should be built, and we would be able to make those decisions quicker because we are closer to the operations.
Now, Chief Justice, several million rand had been injected into the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Do you think that the Commission fulfilled its intended purpose? And do you think those findings will make a dent in corruption, a meaningful dent?
There is absolutely no doubt that the Commission fulfilled its mandate. Whether or not, as a result of its findings and recommendations, enough will be done to create or make a dent on corruption depends on which of those recommendations that were made are implemented, which ones are not implemented. But I have no doubt in my mind that if the majority of those recommendations, including those that relate to mechanisms as opposed to recommendations for prosecution, such as the anti-corruption agency for procurement that we recommended, which doesn't appear to have been accepted up to now, because we knew that most of the corruption happens in regard to procurement tenders. And this agency was going to make sure that it deals with issues of corruption in terms of preventing it and making sure that if it happened, that is corruption, people were found out and that they were dealt with quickly. So in other words, if certain critical recommendations are not followed, then of course we will not make a dent. And if you ask me at this stage, I don't think anybody can say we have begun to make a dent. And in fact, people seem to continue with corruption as if there's never been a commission, not scared, because I think they see that there are no consequences.
Absolutely. And that brings me to my next question, that several state capture culprits are yet to be tried. The question is, do you think they ever will?
Hey, it depends on the NPA. Of course, what has happened in regard to some of the cases of the NPA is cause for concern. We all heard about the case in the Free State where the accused were acquitted even without taking the witness stand. That was cause for concern. And then, of course, of late, we are aware of a case where the court struck the matter off the roll, meaning that the NPA will have to start afresh if they want to proceed. It was struck off the roll on the basis that there had been too long a delay in finalizing or prosecuting the matter. Now, the NPA might well be advised that it's important to gather all the evidence before they take any action, because it doesn't look good when a matter has been in court for about a year and the accused say they are ready and the NPA doesn't seem to be ready, certainly according to the court. So one is very concerned. I don't know if they will ultimately be prosecuted. I would like to hope that they will be,
Then what would your message be to government in dealing with corruption and those who are implicated in such acts?
Well, if there are people against whom there is evidence of criminal activity and any wrongdoing, action should be taken. And people who have allegations of corruption hanging over their heads should not be appointed to government unless they have provided a proper explanation that shows that the allegations have no foundation, So one, as part of fighting corruption, government entities and government departments should not appoint you to any position, including political positions, if there are allegations of corruption hanging over your head and you have not put up any explanation that shows that those allegations have no merit. And that explanation should be made public. But the question is always, why appoint such a person when there are so many thousands who may have the same capabilities or even more than that person who don't have any allegations of corruption hanging over them? What's the problem? So if we are going to, if as a country we want to be seen as fighting corruption seriously, that's one of the things we must do, because when we employ people like that, it undermines our fight against corruption.
Chief Justice, you were quoted in the Daily Maverick in June last year as saying that you fear Parliament is incapable of preventing another bid to state capture. Is this still a sentiment that you hold?
Well, I can't remember what I may have said and whether I may have put it that way, but what I can tell you is that I do hold the view, and I have said that in the past, and maybe that is what Daily Maverick was referring to, namely that as things stood as of last year, if there were other people who tried to engage in state capture the way that the Guptas tried or did, Parliament could not stop them. And that was true last year. It may well still be true today. Let me explain. The reason why state capture was not stopped before South Africans' money was stolen, in the scale in which it was stolen, was because Parliament failed to stop it when it could have stopped it. And it could have stopped it if Parliament accepted the motions that had been presented by the opposition parties at different stages. It could have been stopped in the early years, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, if the majority in Parliament, which was the ANC, did not block the idea of having public inquiries run by Parliament. But they used their majority to block that. So I was saying last year, that has not changed, because when President Ramaphosa and Mr. Mantashe testified in the commission on behalf of the ANC, I asked them about this issue where the majority in Parliament, which was the ANC, refused to do the right thing and blocked measures that could have assisted. In fact, the other measure was that the opposition parties put forward tabled motions of no confidence in President Zuma. If those motions had succeeded, the plan by the Guptas would have collapsed. But the majority, the ANC, blocked those motions of confidence. So Zuma continued. And because Zuma continued, the Guptas continued with their state capture. And the result was that billions and billions of rands of taxpayers' money was stolen. So I was saying, when President Ramaphosa and Mr. Mantashe were before the commission, they were asked questions which were aimed at establishing whether, if people were to try and engage in state capture in the same way as the Guptas did, and it involved the head of state who is a member of the ANC, whether the ANC would allow these members to vote with the opposition. Because if you recall correctly, during that time, whenever there was to be a vote of no confidence against Zuma, the ANC would go to Parliament, and the message to its members was, you can't vote with the opposition. So I had hoped that during the evidence, they would say to me, that is President Ramaphosa and Mr. Mantashe, in the light of what has happened in the past, or the lesson we have learned is that when it comes to corruption or state capture, we will say to our members, examine the motion of confidence on its merits, and then vote according to what you think is right, because we've got to stop or reduce corruption seriously in our country. And then on other matters, maybe they can vote according to the party line, but not on corruption and state capture. I thought they would make an exception, but they were adamant that their members would never vote with the opposition. So which means no matter how good the idea is or motion is that an opposition party comes up with, it doesn't matter. As long as it comes from the opposition, members of the majority party, then the ANC should not vote with the party. I think it's very wrong. This is what placed us where we are with the state capture. So at the moment, the ANC no longer has majority status in parliament, and therefore any head of state who might be a member of the ANC could not be saved by the votes of the ANC only in parliament. They would need the cooperation of other parties. So the question is whether, therefore, the change that has happened in terms of the status of the ANC in parliament, whether that would benefit the country in any way in ensuring that if there was an attempt to engage in state capture by any people, the way the Guptas did involving a head of state that belongs to the ANC, whether the other parties which are now in the government of national unity, whether the other parties would say, because we are in the GNU together, we will vote with the ANC even if the vote is meant to protect somebody that may be involved with others in state capture, or whether they will say, irrespective of whether of the fact that we are in the GNU with the ANC, if anybody's tried to engage in state capture, if it comes to corruption, we will vote the right way as we see it. So we don't know what this change has meant or will mean when we face that kind of situation.
Absolutely. We'll have to wait and see how the GNU plays out within Parliament and other structures as well. And then,
yes.
Chief Justice, what is your reaction, though, to the frequency and somewhat worrying tone of attacks on the judiciary by politicians?
Well, my record is quite clear. We look at each attack and respond where we think we should respond, but we will not allow anybody to attack the judiciary anytime as they like. We will defend the judiciary. I've defended the judiciary, and I'm aware of some people in this country who want to dictate to the judiciary when to speak and know when not to speak. The judiciary will not, certainly during my term, was not prepared to be told by politicians, no, you should not speak now. We decide when to speak ourselves. But what I would say is we need more support. We need more NGOs, members of the legal profession, legal organizations to stand up and defend the judiciary. And I must say, unfortunately, in recent years, one hasn't seen the kind of defense of the judiciary by the legal profession the way it used to be in the past. We are not saying that the judiciary should be defended when it has done anything wrong. No, obviously. But very often, these attacks are completely unwarranted and completely unjustified. And usually they come from people who want to delegitimize the judiciary for their own ends.
Let's change tack somewhat now, CJ. Justice Maya takes over from you on the 1st of September. What is your advice to her and other women who aspire to take up senior roles within the judiciary?
Well, I've always been a big supporter of gender equality and of the fight to advance women. And I think I mentioned in one of these days that when I took over as Chief Justice, there were only 2 women judges who were heads of superior courts. That was Justice Maya, who was then President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and Judge President Monica Liu, who was Judge President of the Northwest Division of the High Court. And I publicly lamented the state of affairs and said that it was untenable because out of 14 heads of court, then only 2 were women. Fortunately for me, during my very short term of office, we made a lot of progress. This number has increased. There were 5 women who were appointed as heads of court during my 2.5 years as Chief Justice, including Justice Maya as Chief Justice. So I've always been a big supporter of women being given opportunities and closing the gap and increasing their representation. So they know that I fully support the idea that women should, their representation should increase.
Now, do you have any pearls of wisdom for those in the legal fraternity who are yet to climb the ranks like you have?
I would say, success requires, in the legal profession, requires a lot of hard work. It requires various other skills like people skills. It requires people who are very determined. Success doesn't happen overnight in this profession. And focusing on the work that you have to do. And then in due course, your hard work will pay off.
And finally, Chief Justice, you've now run your race. You have earned your stripes, as they say. What does retirement look like for you?
Well, the first 12 months, it will be rest and traveling. And then after 12 months, I can begin to have a look in terms of what I want to do. But part of what I wish to do is plow back what I know. That is be involved in the training of young lawyers, young graduates, or those who have just started as attorneys and advocates, to be involved in skilling them in terms of practice. I'm very keen on that. Maybe I might agree to teach at university because that would be part of training. I'm not sure, but the one for practical skills, I'm very keen on.
Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your service and have a great retirement.
Thank you very much.